challenging. And so I want to go to the vulnerability space, and I want you to stop me wherever you want to stop, because
Sure.
we've kind of talked about this before, but you are kind of the classic heart in your sleeve guy.
Yeah.
And anyone listening to this who doesn't know you is probably like, oh, that's like a very positive guy. But you've had your own share of troubles, which you have been very, very open about, especially things having to do with like mental health and challenges. So
Yeah.
wherever you want to go from there.
Yeah. And I appreciate you not only I mean, because that's clearly a signal I send out in the world. And so when people understand that, they know, frankly, like how to approach me, which is usually like with open arms, open hearts, whatever,
Mm.
cliche hardcore lyric you want to put in there. So, like, specifically in regards to, I mean, the first thing that pops in my mind is like my wife went through a long battle with cancer, like a 5 year, trial and tribulation. Fortunately, she's in great health now. She's technically considered cancer free. But it was, at that time, it's like I'm not old, all things considered. I mean, my early 40s, but like we encountered this. So it was probably around, she was 34, 35, roughly speaking. And so, have a child, like there was a lot that was going into this, and it was like a completely rare form of cancer, all this sort of stuff. So she's a very private person, but she obviously understands I'm not. And so, but we had to have a discussion about it where I was like, I can't not address this, not only like in all the public facing things I do, from the podcast, from, Instagram, from everything. Like, I don't want to keep this, just my own desires. Like, I would feel weird keeping this from people, broadly speaking. But I had to have a conversation with her where I'm like, you are obviously the author of your own story, your own life. Like, I will share as much as you want as much as you're comfortable with. So in navigating that, and she was very much like, you can share as much as you want. Like, this is, even though I'm going through it, like this is as much of your story as it is my story. So I was like, all right, well, like the floodgates are open. Like, I am going to put it out there. I'm going to put out this entire journey, whatever trajectory that may go, good, bad, everything in between. And not like oversharing in regards to just like, oh, here's her in the hospital getting chemo. Like, certain elements of it we shared, but like not to the point where it was one of those things where it was like, while I was trying to elicit, emotion and connection, I wasn't, I wasn't trying to exploit whatever it was that we were going through for, extra additional, impressions, whatever. Like, that was not part of the consideration set. Cause like that can obviously be, ghoulish, where people are sharing their stuff where it's just like, dude, that's like too much. I never felt like we were doing that. And I say we because obviously like this wasn't even affecting me. Like, I was healthy. My son was healthy. But in putting it all out there, it was like and this is going to probably harken back to many of your experiences in regards to like playing shows and the connection that you can get with people, obviously, like after you play, and just those really intense conversations you can have about whatever a person derives from your art. The things that really got me emotional during that whole process of sharing everything, it wasn't so much of like the difficult moments of like watching my wife in pain, or the tough doctor visits, or the waiting for the test to come back. Like, all that was obviously excruciating. Where I got emotional was like people of all shapes and sizes. I'll give you a story, and like whether or not Scott Vogel wants this to be shared that's sorry, Scott. I'll apologize to you. But I was living with my parents at the time because the house that we purchased we were redoing. So lived with my parents for the better part of like a year and a half, which was a absolute blessing, because if we were separate from them, it would have been really, really difficult for me to maintain all of our schedules. Anyways, the reason I mentioned that was because like my address was not a quote unquote normal address where people knew to send me stuff. I got a card in the mail from Scott Vogel. This was maybe a couple of weeks after I had shared on Instagram that my wife was going through this. It was the simplest card, where Scott was basically like, I mean, I've known him for a long time, but like I wouldn't call him a close friend. Like, I don't go back 30 plus years, like Chris Logan from Chokehold. He sent me a card of just basically saying like, I'm here if you need anything, just like the simplest of things. But the fact that he had to chase down this, like my parents' address, like, I mean, yes, it was maybe available in an email or two that I maybe sent him many years ago. But that is what really got me emotional, where it was one of those things where people from all shapes and sizes, all usually related to music in some capacity, were reaching out to me, just being there. And then there were other people where it was like that even weren't related to music that I just like worked with in the past. But that was what really, really shook me to my core of just like all of these relationships, that this ephemera that we think that, we create, when it gets reflected back on you when you're living. Because I mean, the joke is where it's like, like people only say nice things at your funeral.
Yeah.
And it was like, I got to witness this where people that don't know my wife at all, they have no relationship with her. They just have a relationship with me. But they were just like, man, I am there for you. I don't even know her. I don't even technically care about her. I mean, they do, obviously, by default, through marriage, they do. But that is what really, 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 like I said, shook me to my core of just how unbelievable people can show up and even if it's just as simple as like an Instagram message or whatever, like all of that really, really, I wasn't expecting to be so caught up in that, of those feelings, of that's where the emotion was being elicited. But that's what really, really shook me.
The interesting line when you're talking about like sharing in a way that creates connection, sharing versus sharing being ghoulish.
Yeah.
And it's I don't want to say it's tough. It's like everyone's different. Like
of course,
one person's going to look at something and being like, "Oh, you're just doing this for likes," or blah, blah.
Of course,
and it's the same way where someone might be like, they look at someone's behavior like you're just doing it for attention.
Yep.
It's like people are doing something for a reason, and whether or not you think that reason is a good reason or a bad reason, that's up to you. It's your perspective.
Yep.
I think people sharing, especially things with like health, mental health, is important, and you can always just mute. Like I've had people who are sharing a bunch of stuff on social media that I was like, good for you, but I got my own stuff going on. I've got a lot of anxiety right now. I can't be watching this.
Yep.
Mute. Okay, you just mute it. And in fact, I literally am not on Instagram anymore because I don't want to have negative critiques of what people are sharing or why they're sharing it. And people should share whatever the hell they want,
of course,
appropriately. Like there's some things I think there's some opinions I don't want to see from people, but it's their right, whatever it is. But you can always just choose to mute or to follow or to pay attention.
Yep.
And I think we're in a better position when if people are going through something from a mental health perspective and they're sharing from like a real space.
Yep.
And again, who am I to judge what's real? But I'm just speaking in generalities or a health thing. I think it's beneficial. Did a podcast with my mom not that long ago, and my dad lives with dementia, and we talked a lot about that. And my parents, they're still married, right? But my dad lives in a home and he doesn't know who we are anymore. And my mom talked a lot about that. And on one side, someone could be like, oh, like, that's to draw people to the podcast. And for another side, it could be like, no, this is for everyone else who's in early stages of this and doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to process it, doesn't know where to go to help. Or for people who've been through it and can look back and give us advice. And I've had both on both sides. I've had people reach out and be like, dude, we're going through this now. Like, thank you for putting that up. And I've had people be like, hey, 5 years from now, this is probably how you're going to feel. And if you are, like, reach out to me. I think if you do something, you do it from the right place and you do it well, because like anything worth doing should be done well.
Sure.
If you're going to, and you do it well, I think it's it gives people the chance to show that they care and that human beings have a really strong good streak if you set up the conditions for them to show it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to that point too, just the idea of being able to like the idea of broadcasting that, like whatever it is that you're going through, to me, the instinct that I immediately went to was just like, if I can't be, and this is going to sound like it's just a walking cliche, but if I can't be the best version of myself to you or anybody else, like I want them to know why, where it's like, yo, I'm in the middle of this. Like, I want you to be aware of this. So not like you need to treat me with kid gloves where I'm like, oh, should I even like bring up like, how's your wife's health? Like, I totally understand why people would not want to bring that up or whatever. But at the same time, it's like broadcasting that just makes you more human because you're going through something that is obvious. I mean, especially when you're talking about the curated lives that we live, if you're not sharing as much as you're going through, like, then you're obviously just sharing this snippet of yourself, which is fine. And that's how most people live. But it was like, I can't do this and not talk about this in some capacity and just be like, all right, we're going to keep this private. We're going to keep this locked down. I was like, that's not my own instinct. Like, no matter what it is that we're going through, it's not my instinct. So I'm like, I just want to make sure you're okay with it. And probably like, we probably would have to navigate it differently if she was, as online as I am, or as similar of a personality as I was. But because she wasn't, she was just like, no, that's totally fine. Like, as long as as long as there is that, attention to detail, like what you're talking about, where like, if you're doing something, you're doing it well, then I'm like, yeah, as long as we're portraying what it is that we're going through, then so be it. And then that way, in turn, people, like you said, will obviously offer unsolicited advice no matter what, which is, that's fine. And people are trying to identify with whatever it is you're going through. But understanding that people know what it is that you're going through if they're approaching you at a certain time. And that's like just beneficial in general, to your point.